Hello, that was Jeff Mitchell's Fat Cigars you were listening to, and that means it's time for Not Just Blowing Smoke, coming at you live from Twin Smoke Shop Studio headquarters in Londonderry, New Hampshire. Be sure to subscribe to us on Podbean, iHeartRadio, Pandora, Spotify, iTunes, Google, YouTube, Facebook, wherever you're watching this podcast so that you don't ever miss a thing. I'm Pastor Padron. I'm here with my co-hosts, Pat and Dave, and we have Debris with us from the 724 Lounge. She's back and able to smoke after having all of her teeth removed.
Yeah, these are dentures.
Well, we all have our problems. You know, how are you doing after all that?
After
You get your balance
after
back?
the first, I didn't even go under.
Really?
No, I did the numbing, and that was it. It was traumatic for the moment, but I got over it.
Very good.
There was just like a little bit of buzzing and drilling in my head, and some seat clenching.
That is
and
always weird when you can't feel anything
You
and there's
just
buzzing and drilling and things shooting out of your
Pulling and-
mouth. Oh, it's bad. You see steam coming out. You're like, what the heck?
But I feel much better now.
No,
I
that's
had my headphones on. I was listening to conspiracy theories on YouTube. We were good. Yeah.
nice. And you're able to smoke again. You had to take some time off that, right?
I did just about 2 weeks.
Oh,
Wow.
that's horrid.
It sucked.
Yeah,
No
it's-
straws, no smoke.
Everything must taste so much better now, though.
I feel happier. You know what? I have more space. In there.
that's what counts. That you feel happier, Bree. That's what
More
counts.
room for cigar smoke.
More room for cigar smoke. Yeah, less teeth to get in the way. Well, tonight we're going to be going into a discussion that Pat's going to lead on the latest announcement from the FDA. But before we get into that, let's talk a little bit about the cigar we're smoking. It's this. This is the Sindicato Maduro Toro, and it features a Mexican San Andreas Moron wrapper. Is that how you would pronounce it?
What was that?
Are you listening, Pat, to the podcast?
No.
Yeah. We're actually on air, Pat. So this is specifically a San Andreas Moron. Now, it's spelt like moron, but I know, like, in Spanish, it's probably not how you would pronounce it,
It's really
like moron or something.
Moron.
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 I can't believe it's moron.
There's no tildes.
It's like
No.
it's just a very
Accent marks.
unfortunate name for U.S. people, especially here in the Northeast, where moron is one of the favorite words to call people you don't like. And then aside from the Mexican San Andres wrapper, it's got Nicaraguan binder and filler. It's a box press Toro, 6x54. And Bree, what are we pairing with this tonight? You picked out a
So,
fine bourbon
I
for us.
did. So we are drinking the Ezra Brooks.
Ezra
It's
Brooks.
not just any Ezra Brooks either. It is the 107 proof Ezra Brooks. So honestly, it's a really affordable bourbon for what it is. It's made the traditional non-charcoal filtered way.
Okay.
Charcoal filtered, and
The
then
traditional charcoal filter?
yes, the old-fashioned charcoal filter way.
The old I
and
can
then
kind of
it's-
taste a little bit of
It's
that.
bottled at 107 proof, so this is a pretty high proof bourbon, but it has like a really refined and smooth finish. So it has that warmth to it, but you almost wouldn't guess that it's as high proof as it is.
It's got a very interesting aftertaste.
Doesn't it?
How would you describe it? I'm like at a loss for words.
I
but
mean,
you're my
I'm
bourbon babe.
wow.
Whoa.
That made me feel awkward.
Right?
Pat,
That's saying something.
it's so easy to make you feel awkward.
He's gotten better though.
Oh, all I have to do is touch his hand and he'll be crawling.
So the forward notes, like the prominent notes,
Forward.
which I do get, but it's also what they describe it as, are rich caramel, vanilla, and oak. So I get that on the nose, but I am getting like a little bit of like not an appley aftertaste, but it has something unique to it. Like it's not your traditional oak; it's almost like a honey coated oak. Like it,
Yeah, it's like a sweet charred oak.
Honeysuckle.
Sweet charred oak.
yeah.
Charred honeysuckle.
Would you agree with that, Pat?
Yeah, it has like a.
A sweet charred oak there even.
I don't want to say banana. I feel like I said that recently.
I already said apple, so
Did you?
apples
Apple?
and bananas.
Apples and bananas.
Yeah, this is one of our Potion Master's favorites as well.
Oh, okay.
Kendra Bourbon.
Yeah, it's a very, very nice bourbon. All right. So now that we know what the cigar is, why don't we start by letting you, Pat, kind of give us an overview of what this announcement from the FDA was, which they did on the 10th of March. And then we'll take the time, go around, talk about the cigar and what we're getting and the pairing, and then we'll go into kind of discussing what it means, what we
What
think
does
of
it
it.
really mean anyway?
Yes, Dave, yes.
Yeah, so I'm just gonna start off because like I think the last brief I had done was I don't remember, but I think it was about the deeming rule and like the
Yes.
current litigation going on with the option 2 defining premium cigar to be under its own category, and we had a favorable opinion so far. The verdict's not quite out yet, but it seems pretty favorable for the industry. For premium cigars, again, pipe tobacco is not incorporated in that, but disclaimer to begin with is this is FDA's agenda regardless of that hearing. Now, if the verdict comes in that premium cigars are going to be treated differently and categorically different, then I think it's going to be different when this
Yeah, they
new
have to come up with a
regulation's
whole-
applied.
Some
But
of them might apply, but most won't.
this
yeah.
is kind of a one size fits all without being a one size fits all thing for all tobacco.
Right.
So, regardless of that case, this would still be something we're dealing with. So, overall, I guess I'll kind of say like what I think it is before I go into like the facts of it. Essentially, FDA, instead of regulating the actual product in your hand, they're regulating the means that brings that product to your hand. So it's
That's a good way of putting
going to the actual manufacturer's end of it now, opposed to our, just like the retail standpoint to the consumer. This is now the FDA is kind of putting the foot in the door in the actual manufacturing of it.
Mm-hmm.
So the objective of this new regulation really is to regulate, in our case, cigar factories. Again, this pertains to all tobacco, like cigarettes, bulk tobacco, e-cigarettes, pipe tobacco, anything tobacco related. And then domestic and international, as long as they do business in the United States, they're going to be subject to these regulations. And just random facts, they're doing their public hearing April 12th. The comment period is going to be going until September 6th. It's typically 180 days. So if you're in the industry, the FDA is obligated to answer all the comments. So that's just good to know. So when will it happen? If this goes through, it's going to be, if you're considered a big company, which is over 350 employees, it's going to be 2 years after the final rule is officially enacted. If you're a smaller company being below 350 employees, it's going to be 4 years until you have to be with regulation. So, obviously, as I had mentioned, the current, the CAA versus the US FDA is going to be a big factor in what happens here, with what a premium cigar is, if it's going to be defined as differently, which I'll touch on that towards the end of this thing.
Okay.
So, the document's 297 pages. I had read around 160. I read the legalese part of it because Charlie on Half Wheel did a really good job kind of dissecting the stuff that really pertains to premium cigars. So I read the portion that I feel he may not. I'm sure he read the whole thing, but I read the stuff that I guess like an attorney would read, the boring stuff. So essentially, the general gist of the regulations is the FDA wants to have the manufacturers kind of dictate some of the regulations, so they would be tasked with essentially saying how the proper way for, in our case, a premium cigar to be made would be. And it's a lot of documentation. Everything is going to be documented, like to the point where if you're growing tobacco and you're not manufacturing, but you're selling those bulk tobaccos to a manufacturer, like they want unique SKU codes for each component, like whether it's the wood for the box, the Lajero and a filler. So if there's a defect in the product, it can go back and see, like, out of this, and every box would have to be dated. They could look at the date of the box for the manufacturing and then see, okay, well, this was defected. It's the, barcode here. Oh, it was the Jalapa Lajero. But so they want everything to be systematically documented. And this is called MMRs, Master Manufacturing Records. So this is what they're really implementing in this policy, amongst many other things. So before I get really deep into it, I'm going to go with their legal authority on how they're able to do this, and I think it really touches on the purpose behind the regulation. So the power is derived from, obviously, like the delegation of power from Congress to the FDA to handle tobacco, and it has to be in the benefit of the public welfare and health. So that's obviously tobacco, not just premium cigars, but all tobacco, the health risks that they've have studies to prove. Again, this is like kind of a one-size-fits-all thing, so it's just all tobacco. It's not, there's no, like, whenever I say health risks, I'm not talking about just cigars. Like, it's a lot of what they're citing in this entire 300 pages is mainly e-cigarettes. Is like their big target, along with cigarettes. Because again, like when it comes to like having, different metals or things inside the tobacco, that's typically what you have in that sector, not ours.
Right.
So the circumstances that they're really looking at is they want the product to not have any foreign objects in it. That's like a big thing. Like when you receive a product, like
Fingernails.
they cite
pieces of
fingernails,
the
like
little chopper
plastic,
blade.
metal.
Which
So
there is none, but whatever.
yeah, but again, this is all tobacco. So it's really to help ensure that tobacco products are not being altered in any ways, including having these foreign objects in them, or if the ratio of nicotine or what's in the cigar is off, they're concerned that the consumer is going to be shocked with the additives that they're not expecting in the product. So they're really
That I think that depends, because one of the things that I got from reading it was one thing might not apply to another. Like the amount of nicotine that they put in vape juice, they're not going to have a lab in a cigar manufacturing because they don't deal with the nicotine level. It's a natural agricultural product. So that probably won't pertain to them.
Yeah, I mean, again,
and they also said that they would allow them to come up with their own rules. And they, in their own, that was heavily encouraged. Like this to me, I mean, as far as like, it didn't really sound that bad.
Well, I'll get to why it's bad in a moment. So I'm just going to do 3 quick little things that they referenced on, like the purpose for refusing emission of products. One is if they have been manufactured, processed, or packed under insanitary conditions.
Unsanitary.
Unsanitary. Insanitary.
Unsanitary.
Are forbidden or restricted in sale of the country in which they are produced or from which they were exported, and if there's any alteration or misbranded. So everything that they're doing is really to protect these things, like not having foreign objects in the product, not being misbranded, not like the boxing of it.
All of which on the surface, who would have a problem with that?
Yeah, which
on the surface.
From what I've heard from people coming back from cigar manufacturers, like 90% of this shit is already done. It's just it's not done in the way the FDA likes it. Like,
it's not codified.
double spaced type letter and stuff like that. Like this is stuff that's been passed down from generation to generation.
So I'll get into that.
Where it's known. It's just not written.
So there's 11 points that are pretty important as to what this is doing. So that's going to be influencing especially the premium cigar industry. So first of all, organizational charts. You're going to have, and then this is part of Charlie. This is what Charlie on Half Wheel thought were the important things that pertaining to cigars. Again, he read the half I don't think I read. So, setting up who's responsible for what. So you would have these people in these factories that are responsible for reporting to the FDA and keeping like the documents organized. Secondly, it would be worker cleanliness. So this is actually something that could be pretty adverse to a premium cigar.
Smoking while you're making
Or anything
yeah.
like that, like hairnets, jewelry, smoking while you're working. I think it's gonna Americanize the conditions in the factories, which again could be a good thing, but again could be a bad thing. Um, Obviously building cleanliness and maintenance. Now the issue of this would be there's some factories and rolling areas that don't have like sealed walls, like they're essentially outdoors.
Right.
So when it comes to these standards, like could that potentially disqualify the factory? I'm not sure. Environmental conditions, HVAC, humidity monitoring, air filtration.
Well, that's what I mean. When you're outside, do you need any of that?
Well, here's the thing. I mean,
we make concrete forms outside. You don't have to worry about dispelling fumes from concrete because you're out freaking side.
Not for
You know what I
nothing,
mean?
but the government's been trying to put a tax on natural things ever since the beginning of time.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, and
it
then
makes sense they're
I
coming
just
for premium cigars.
went down and saw a farm that probably really is not going to have to do anything for this. The Aladino farm. They're so freaking
Everything
clean.
is labeled. Everything is
but
clean.
It's, it's
everything.
beside the point.
you know.
But down there, HVAC means absolutely nothing.
Right?
there is no HVAC down there. I mean, it's just that's not a talk about Americanizing the process, and I think that's a great way of putting it, Pat. I don't. That would be a big burden on some of these factories if they end up having to say, look, if your working conditions are not kept at this degree and this humidity level and
But it doesn't need to be for the product, and I think that's one of the things that, I think that's a loophole. As far as like from what I got from it, they weren't saying that when cigar company A and cigar company B do these regulations, they're not going to be the same for both. It's going to be specific to them because everybody's different. That's what I got from it.
So I'll give my 2 cents on it after I kind of get the general gist down. So the manufacturing standards will have to be different. So again, like as I said, like documentation for the entire process of it, like what's in the cigar, how much it's supposed to weigh. I'll get to that shortly. I actually have a quote from the actual rule itself that speaks to this point. Handling complaints and errors. So if you have an issue with a cigar, again, like the remedial measures, if you voice a complaint, that would have to be documented on record. If a consumer complaint, a preface, and they would have to be able to look at the the documentation and like those unique SKUs I was mentioning and see what the issue was.
right.
Risks, which again could be for premium cigars or e-vapes and all that stuff. So you would need foreseeable risks to be documented, which in our case would be like cigar mold, beetles. If you use pesticides, I don't think there's many companies that do, if any. But those kinds of things, just different risks associated with. And then one of the things that they had said was, FDA gives the following example. A risk associated with product design is a dissolvable tobacco product whose size and shape resembles candy, resulting in potential misuse by the harm of children. So that seems like kind of an old thing, like the deeming rule, the whole argument we talked about last time, like the whole threat to kids. I don't know if they're specifically attacking premium tobacco here, but again, like it's very weird reading this because it's 90% of this thing is everything but premium cigar. Like
I want to know
FDA's
what they
main
mean by
focus wasn't-
dissolvable. You know what I mean? Like what does that actually mean in their terminology? Like
So-
what are they trying to get at with dissolvable? Because that doesn't sound like anything it would have to do with a premium tobacco.
So
Well, with cigars, no, but it might with other tobacco-related products.
So now even like supplier qualifications, like if you're gonna have a supplier, like say I'm out to a Patuente and I'm buying Cameroon from Marifel, I would have to have why I think their services are acceptable and how effective their supply is if I want to start doing business with another company. I would have to have on record why I selected them, how their performance is, what their quality is, and kind of justify why I'm choosing this supplier to get my tobacco. Packaging, I tried reading into it. I think it's, again, e-cigarettes and cigarettes and things of that sort, because, like, we
They
had
got
a
their butt
favorable
handed to them. Yeah.
opinion about warning labels, but, like, maybe not misleading packaging. I'm not sure where the packaging would really go. And the big thing is FDA inspection. So the FDA would be traveling to these factories and inspecting and making sure the documentation is in order and making sure that they're following the procedures. So one of the things that they had actually said about premium cigars in the regulation is the proposed rule would require the production process procedures include certain additional requirements if applicable under proposed rule. If a production process includes a manual method or process, this will be bunching or rolling cigars, the production process procedures would be required to describe the manual method or process in sufficient detail to ensure that the tobacco product meets established specializations and include, if applicable, the criteria for workmanship using a standard or approved model sample. An actual or diagrammatic representation of the model sample could show the design and construction of a tobacco product. For example, a hand-rolled cigar could be represented by a model sample that defines the type and size of the tobacco leaf to be used for the wrapper, the type and amount of filler tobacco to be used, and brand label to be applied, and the size, shape, length, diameter of the finished rolled cigar. Similarly, a documented standard could establish specific length, gauge, width, and shapes of certain types of standardized cigars, i.e. Corona, Churchill, and Pantella.
i.e. Vitolas.
Sounds like just like more paperwork.
So
Yeah.
the interesting thing that I actually picked out from this
Those also do not have to be made public by the company.
yeah, but so the thing that I picked out from this portion that I don't think Charlie really thought of, or maybe he did, just didn't reference it in his article, is a common thing is factory seconds. And when my reading of this regulation would mean that you can't do that. If you're making a certain cigar, and it doesn't meet the quality control, I don't think you can just reuse it. There is articles here, I'm not going to keep reading long paragraphs about reusing tobacco, but you're not going to be able to do it. So it's even stringent on if you
That
have
sounds
a
government
box.
to me. Let's create more waste.
So if you have like a box of 20 cigars and 3 are defective, you can replace the 3 with other ones, but I think the ones that you're taking out of the box, I don't think you can repurpose them. From what my understanding, I could be wrong.
Well, I mean, that's something that, if that's a correct reading,
If they make a
of what's
document
here.
for it in a process, yes, they could. If they
but
make
if
a,
you're
they make a
documenting,
documented
like, when it
process
comes to, like,
on
when
how
you're,
to reuse something,
if you're documenting how these products are made like you're supposed to be, you can't document how a factory second is made because it's coincidental with the process. You're not intentionally making that cigar.
what I was starting to say was, that may be something that needs
well,
added to this.
they're also
that-
concerned about environmental, and not having waste is environmental. So taking
That's
care of
that's
your
not
waste
really
and reusing it,
that's not
I think
really
that's-
pertaining to the relevance right now on this. I mean, environmental concerns aren't really, like, the main concern is the product that's being. I think the FDA wants to know what's actually in these products.
tobacco.
They want to know.
Well, typically all you have to do right now is just say it's dark air cured tobacco leaf, but they want everything. They want to know exactly what it actually is. Like the Sober Mesa Brulee, why is it sweet? You know what I mean? Like they want to know everything about that cigar.
Right.
So overall, the pros and cons. So if anyone's any questions about it, I read a lot of this thing. I just don't want to legal knees the hell out of the show. So if anyone's any random questions about the regulations, I have the answers. I'm just not going to keep aimlessly going without conversation. So I had written down 3 pros and 4 cons on my understanding of the policy. And I'll just disclaim in the beginning here that, like Dave had mentioned that it's a good thing. it seems on the face a good thing, which I think a lot of people are going to look at it that way. But, like the FDA is starting to regulate factories, and the first level of regulation might seem good because, there's more say in it. But after they establish that they can regulate these factories, it's going to be round 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. That's going to be what impacts the industry, not necessarily the first round. So we still have to be very critical of what they're doing. So the pros that I picked out from it is currently like the Sindicato that we're smoking right now. It's not going to impact this cigar. The current regulations as they stand, like this Sindicato is going to be the same. Nothing with this specific cigar is going to change. The second pro is stage 1 of the regulations. To me, it does seem positive. There's nothing wrong with having like a clean environment or healthy workplaces, or to me documenting what's in the cigar. It's not going to be public knowledge, but I just think like it's just, to me, it's good to do those things. And then the third is the current state of the FDA seems to be allowing the industry to shape at least stage 1 of the regulations. So that kind of mingles in with one of the cons that I have, which I'll get to in a moment. And then, so my cons are that the sophisticated documentation they're looking for is going to me, like, limit creativity. So when, and this is something Charlie spoke to as well, like if someone wants to try to make something new or test something, like Aladino in this case, maybe doing the Candela, they're not going to just be able to just do it that easily. It's going to take a lot of documentation, a lot of manpower, a lot of processes. So it might deter some companies from actually trying to do a really short, even like TAA, for instance. They, a lot of them are only a couple thousand boxes.
Right.
Like those kinds of small releases are going to start probably not being that profitable to do.
That's one of the comments they could make on the rules is like, this doesn't work for small batches.
Or in that case, that's when I think the regulation is going to be bad, because I don't think just because it's a small batch means that they're going to lower the standard for the documentation. The documentation seems to be the main purpose of this, so anything you want to do to deter documentation,
Yeah, but documentation does not equal quality, because
it doesn't matter.
The quality's been there before.
It doesn't matter.
Before the FDA got their dirty little fingers involved.
The FDA would say you don't know that the quality's been there.
You don't know either.
Right. And don't you want to know? That's the argument they're making, is that it's let's make sure that these things are being produced in a safe way, in a regular way, where nothing shady is going on, and if something goes wrong, we can track down the problem and deal with it. That's from the FDA's point of view. I think that's what they're trying to do. And if that's all they're trying to do, I don't really have a problem with it in theory. My big problem with this is in reality. I don't see the FDA sending, people to all of these factories in, Honduras,
I'll sign up for that job.
Nicaragua, the Dominican Republic.
All right.
I don't see them going over to the Mirafel, Cameroon farms in Africa. I don't see them going to Indonesia to look at Basuki tobacco. I don't see that happening, and I don't necessarily see all of these little factories or growers.
It's going to be Zoom meetings, man.
Saying, I'm going to agree to this.
Not for nothing.
And,
but like,
and
yeah.
I think I don't know how possible this is to do.
Well, I'm going to say, like,
there's got to be detail-oriented people in
I'm
every
taking,
single...
Yeah.
It seems inequitable
like,
too.
with me being in environmental law, like, that's, like, the EPA is another government agency. They have the means and ability to do those things. Like, it does, like, looking at it from the outside, like, yeah, that's pretty tedious, but they might even hire like cigar people to do it. Like, it's very attainable for them to do that. So,
So devil's advocate, like going to the whole like if it ain't broke, don't fix it mentality. And you look at historically, with vapes and e-cigarettes and cigarettes, like you've had all these like public health crises, like the vapes with the popcorn lung, yada yada yada, all that stuff. And those things, obviously, they're cracking down on that regulation wise. But when we look at the premium cigar industry
That's been going on for
historically,
thousands of
have
years.
we ever had any serious health
so they had spoken to
issues?
this in the actual regulation. I'm not going to quote it because I didn't memorize it, but I did read it. They're one of the legal authorities that they have under the FDA is to basically look out for inherent risks that are not typically associated with the product. So if something is made a certain way that's not to standard and it introduces another risk that's not typically in that product, that's something that they're tracking down on as well. So that goes to the documentation, like why, let's just use, like, just pretend like, just say like there's this new undiscovered cancer that suddenly everyone that smokes Maduro cigars breaks out with in 2030, right? Like they want to be able to see what caused it, because that's not a traditional risk that is associated with premium cigars. So that's one of the legal authorities under their
Right.
delegated power that they're looking out for. So it's not necessarily like, oh, cigars cause cancer. It's stuff that may happen down the road that isn't currently associated with these products.
So more
Unforeseen
preventative
problems.
rather
And a
So-
paper trail for it.
So that's what their focus really is. When it comes to our industry, obviously, like e-cigarettes, there's some sketchy illegal sales and things going on there, but that's really what I took away from this, that they're looking to kind of prevent from happening and to keep ties on, which leads into my second con, which is that I mentioned this earlier. It opens the door for FDAs to regulate factories. I think this could be very bad, and especially like as these regulations, this is one big overall rule. So I'm concerned that they might start commingling different sectors of the industries together when they do these regulations. There's obviously some things that would never be applicable to premium tobacco, like
Right.
there's no laboratories in a rolling facility, where in like vapes and stuff you have, I don't know what the hell they do, but they do some chemistry shit in a laboratory. So that's my third one, and this is actually something I was thinking when I first saw this come out. I was reading about it, and then Charlie actually put this on his article as well. In that, one of the big cons and the unfortunate reality is the industry likely isn't going to take advantage of the time that we earned from getting potentially this favorable opinion from the deeming rule case. Like right now, we have an opportunity to kind of shape these regulations, put these comments in and kind of use the time we were given to distinguish premium tobacco from everything else. And I really don't think that we're going to take advantage of the time that we were just given to kind of remediate things. Not remediate, but to get ahead of the curve here. Because I think a lot of people have a misconception that if we get a favorable ruling from the deeming rule, that the FDA is just going to stop touching
No, they're not.
premium cigars. They're 100% going to regulate them. They're going to come back with something else. And
This is their time to set their rules.
Yeah.
Like that's like from what I got, Pat, is that they gave the industry a lot of leeway to say, hey, look, this is going to be regulated. We prefer it if you just did it yourself and we work together. Otherwise, we're just going to do A, B, C, X, Y, and Z. So this is our time to say, this is what we're going to do. And I think if we miss that step, and if they're not proactive, then they're going to be screwed.
Yeah, and if unfortunately, that's one of the things I've learned about the cigar industry in my time here is that typically they do things at the last minute, and that goes all the way down to the stores. You have an event planned, 6 months in
No,
advance.
nothing like that ever happens
And
here, Dan.
what happens is it's on the calendar for 6 months, but for most shops they don't even start thinking about that event until like the day before. You know,
Well,
I mean,
one of-
how many times have I heard reps tell me that it was, the event was at a store that they were doing that was going to be Thursday. They put in the order for the cigars on Monday, and prayed that they would get there in time. I mean, that's how, from the top to the bottom, that's how we are. We're so, engrossed in
minute.
enjoying cigars, and that we don't actually do anything.
And as a quick little point, as far as like the
Side note,
insanitary,
no, hold on,
they-
time out. I just got a text from Brett 2 minutes ago that says no sound.
we should be good. We got sound right there.
Hmm.
It's sound. There's sound.
All right. Yeah.
There's
Maybe
sound.
it came back.
It's their stuff.
Alright.
Tell them to check.
Maybe Brett's screwing with me.
It's the she says
Entirely
the
possible.
term insanitary is not necessarily wrong. It's just the British form of saying unsanitary.
Oh, I like it even more now. Thought the condition's
Insanitary.
quite insanitary.
As
Insanitary.
As opposed to out sanitary.
I suppose unsanitary.
So
I'd rather be in
I like that.
sanitary
I think
than out
one of the
sanitary.
negatives I didn't put because it's kind of like an opinionated thing
How
is-
she knows that, I don't know.
is I think that insanitary, right? That's the thing, right? Is
Yeah,
that-
no,
yeah.
it's just the original
say it with the
form
British
of the
accent.
word. Yeah.
Yeah,
Here
so,
We
in-
say unsanitary, they say.
so that's why I
insanitary.
didn't defend
Here in-
myself
here
because
in,
I was going to
here
insult
in
you guys.
America, we say unsanitary.
Yes, here in
America.
America.
So anyway, so I know English. So Dan, I'm gonna swear.
I told you.
So I honestly when it comes to like the industry doing something about it, a lot of these big Titan, manufacturers in the industry, they're already doing a lot. It's very obtainable for them to meet these requirements, and I
Yeah.
think the big factories are actually going to set the precedent. And I think this is gonna. I think a lot of the big machos in the industry are gonna probably like this, at least right off the bat, because I think it's gonna kill a lot of small factories. Like your typical example, like Pete Johnson with Garcia making like the Tap Brown label, like those kinds of interactions. I don't think are gonna happen if this takes effect, because you're not gonna. The documentation, it's gonna. The boutique
Well, it
lines and
depends on,
the creativity. I think it's gonna.
I'm sure that there's also going to be like legislation on like when those documents have to be provided. And I'm pretty
I
sure
would
it's not
say that
immediate.
then that's you don't know, right? Like that's why it is concerning. So that's just like a side con that I just
Because they
kinda
also
have
said
there.
something like, the smaller companies would have like 4 years to even come up with the stuff.
Well, you also
So-
hope there's like an additional streamlined point of contact. Where obviously it gets trickier when there's more hands involved, but where smaller companies
this
can
is
go to
this is
one
where the
person.
tobacco industry could really
say,
shine. It would be like
yeah.
if they set up people like we're gonna have our own infrastructure of people that are doing this. Like these are the people we want to regulate and come in for us. See, it's this person's really good, this person's really good. If we really get proactive with this, we could make it so much easier for our own industry if we're proactive about it. Because
So-
regardless, it's gonna happen. Right? Like, is there any hope of this, this going to like the Supreme Court or something like that, and this being like, no?
Just start planting cigar
Or
people
does
in
the FDA get to say, these are the rules, and then that's it?
Well, I mean, just like depending on how the rule goes for the deeming rule, like you could still argue that we should be exempt from this as well. So this is going to probably be another big pissing match. But now, something Charlie had mentioned is he thinks there's not going to be a lot of companies involved in this one because it's, again, if you're a big company, this is pretty easy for you to do. And then that's with the issue that I referenced earlier on people not thinking how
easier.
bad this is.
Mm-hmm.
And like this is just phase 1, and typically phase 5 through whatever is what kills the industry.
And
So,
that's where the thing is, if this is the end of the agenda, okay. But
This
I
is
don't,
where the little
I don't-
guys need to calm
I
down.
don't believe at all this is really what they're trying to
I mean, and even
accomplish.
like
I think they're trying to get their foot back in the door so that they can.
well, they want to see how it's done. I think this is how they're teaching themselves how it works, and then they're going to start coming harder on it. And here's an example I was thinking of. So, I like Liga Privada, right? So,
Yeah.
the T52 crop 4-something years ago, because of one of the hurricanes, got completely drenched, and now the crop right now, a lot of Connecticut, I know Tabernacle had the same issue. So, like current T52s that are coming out are as dark as a Liga number 9 because I'm assuming because they have to ferment the hell out of the tobacco so it's ready to go. Under this regulation, I don't think you can do that.
Unless they make a documentation explaining the process.
But now you would have
That's the
to
thing. They'd have to
essentially
explain the process.
you would have to release the 52 because now you're altering the process
process
on
by
how
which
that
it's made.
cigar is made, which is a no-no.
Well, see, that's the whole thing. Is I'd have to say if they explain the process with leeway,
A vape.
like, for instance,
This is how we normally do it. Under this
circumstance,
this
this
is how we do
happens.
it.
Under this circumstance, this happens.
So we get ahead of them with our process and giving
You know,
them
like
the
that's
techniques so
what
they
they
don't
have to say
come
because
back.
it's an agriculture. Do you have you ever bought an orange and then complained about it?
But
and
no,
wanted
but
the
no,
right to,
and then all right, then
you
if,
know what I
if
mean?
you're
'Cause
gonna argue
it's-
me on this one, how about step 2?
it's ridiculous.
Every time you grow tobacco, the crop yield's different, and
Same with oranges, same with
but
apples, same with bananas.
yeah, but they don't get regulated like tobacco is gonna be. So the thing is like when it comes to actually blending these
They
cigars,
do have an FDA stamp on them
a
though.
lot of times when you're blending tobacco, they change the blend so it like they blend for the flavor, not the tobacco. So they sample the tobacco and they blend it accordingly. That's a no-no.
So I don't think it's a no-no. I think the process is what they're looking for.
I am gonna tell you if it's not a no-no now, that's going to be a no-no. I think that's going to be a big no-no. And I think it's going to be something that is, if it's not a no-no, it's going to be really rigorous to actually do. And it's, again, smaller companies. And then even so much as these documents have to be accessible by the FDA, like really accessible, and they have to be in English, like good English.
Yeah.
So that's the small factories. Like again, I haven't been to a factory, so I don't know if everyone has fluent English people that can do these things. But again, your really small factories, like your boutique, I don't know if you're gonna be able to keep up with that. But even go to like Florida, like again, domestically here, like those small little like like mom and pop shops that are rolling their own cigar, are they gonna be able to keep doing it? 'Cause is this something that they're gonna take up? Right, like and then they don't have like the same means that these big factories do for consistency. So is that something that's going to be gone as well? Like it's just and then, so to me, like I think this is a really bad thing.
Well, didn't they
gonna
make
preface
a
it.
statement on like what actually defines like a company like under 350 employees and stuff like that?
No,
Big
but
money
yeah, no,
company
big and
versus
small. That's
small.
just when you have to be in regulation. It applies
yeah.
to if you
So if you have
sell,
like a mom and pop shop, obviously you're
that's
not
still
under regulation.
Oh yeah, you are. If you sell tobacco in this country, you're under regulation. Doesn't matter if you're one person doing it.
Let's take a break from the discussion here for a minute and talk about the Sindicato.
It's good.
I want to know what I'm halfway. I'm getting ready to get into the final third.
Yep.
And we haven't even started talking about the cigar.
Well, it's been
So
a good
let's
topic. So.
yeah, it has. The discussion's been great. Dave, what are you picking up from the cigar?
Oh,
You like
jeez.
the pairing or not?
I love the pairing. It's. I'm getting a lot of chocolatey espresso notes.
That San
Some-
Andreas
some
really
earth.
comes across
Yeah.
with this. Yeah.
It's smooth. It's got like this really nice creamy woody finish on the palate. I think the pairing is perfect for it.
Good
You know?
job.
Yes. Yes.
Pat.
The drink has like a really nice sweetness to it, like a woodiness, and then it has like a nice like, it's a soft spice that kind of goes to like what I'm gonna call a banana on the finish, but that soft spice kind of leaves you like salivating a little bit, so it kind of opens your palate up and like,
Yeah, it
if
does.
I'm not taking big sips, but I'm taking enough of a sip that it kind of like, I'm not gonna say shocks my palate, but the spice kind of goes through my nose a little bit, so it kind of
Yep.
opens me up.
Yep.
So when I draw from the cigar, it actually brings out like a Cajun red spice more than like typically San Andreas. Like this specific cigar, when I've had it before, it's had like a white spice. Like it's there, but it's not really like
Yeah,
a
this is
stimulating
this is
spice.
definitely like a darker spice.
So
yeah.
it brings out the spice a lot more. It's like a dry cocoa nib, with a little bit of hay, and then that sweet kind of espresso, chocolatyness on the finish, and then like the Nicaraguan tobacco obviously is giving you a little bit of cedar, like earth. So the drink is definitely bringing out the San Andreas more than Nicaraguan tobacco,
Yeah.
but the finish still has that kind of leather earth and those typical Nicaraguan characteristics you look for when you smoke something like this.
It's a lot of umami with this. Like I'm salivating from like
Yeah.
just from sipping, and then when I take a draw off the cigar, I'm salivating.
Yeah, your spit's flung over here at least 3 times.
Yeah. Isn't that just normally you, Dave?
Mm-hmm.
You're just living in umami.
Umami.
Now, Bree, I'm interested to hear what you think about your pairing here.
I'm very happy. I mean, Pat hit the nail on the head. Pat and Dave, like this pairing has a lot of chemistry. Like off the bat, you can look at the tasting profile, the notes, and you can say, yeah, like, this might be good. But I think what happens is this pairing almost like the bourbon has the effect that simple syrup would have in an old fashioned. You say like, the old fashioned, you take the bourbon, it's the forward element, it's straight, it's typically like stronger. The cigar, I think for whatever reason, I expected to have more pepper and to be pretty full bodied. But with this being a 107 proof bourbon, with a smooth finish, it's creating a reaction that makes these together very enjoyable, very smooth with that underlying sweetness. So it's almost like they both take the edge off of each other, but the strength is still underneath. And I am getting that salivary effect where it's creating this whole experience. And there's like the right amount of strength and sweetness and warmth.
I
So like you
totally
get,
agree with that.
yeah.
All right, very good. All right, now we can go back to our.
So the last
Y'all can.
Restitutry asks if there's been a deep dive into the cigar industry by the FDA before specifically. I said yes.
Before? What do you mean before?
Before this, and I'm like they've tried multiple.
What do you mean by deep dive?
What does she mean by deep dive? I would trying to regulate, and I would say yes.
Well, they've always been trying to. They just haven't been regulating
they haven't
premium
really,
cigars under a premium cigar category. It's been regulated as tobacco.
yeah,
so,
as a group, not
And this
specifically
regulation,
cigar,
again, is tobacco.
Right.
And we're in that. So that's why the deeming rule, and if we get an umbrella under premium tobacco,
they'll have to rewrite the book just for us.
well, possibly. It depends. Like
Most
again, like you have like vapes, cigarettes, a lot of different categories under this ordinance here. So
But
you very
didn't
well.
say that there was no mention of premium cigar at all.
They mentioned cigar. They don't use the word premium cigar. And that the quote that I read earlier for the manual assembly of a cigar. That's the only time that they mentioned it in the whole reg here. But so now my fourth con that I think is going to get Dan's ears perked up is I think that this is super detrimental for pipe tobacco. I think this is like I think pipe tobacco already is neglected a lot in like the fight, and I think that this is just gonna put it so much further back. And I'll mention before we get into that, like even like premium tobacco, like Drew Estate, like having acid. I don't know, like if this deeming rule comes in favor of premium cigars, like what that's gonna do to factories that produce other kinds of cigars. So, uncertainty there, but I honestly, and Dan can probably speak better to this than I can, but based on these regs and this documentation, disclosing everything, like when I think of like pipe tobacco, like that is like,
well, isn't
even
the
bulk
majority
bulk
of pipe
tobacco
owned by like a few groups right now?
But bulk
Most.
tobacco is something that they specifically mention in this, like bulk tobacco, like it's. And then I had even, like, I mentioned this to Dan again. This is me just thinking very critical of step 1 of this regulation, is they actually consider roll your own cigarette filters as a bulk tobacco product. So bulk tobacco product,
Well, that makes sense.
when I'm reading this, is like if it's something that is ready to sell. So for instance, like a carton of cigarettes is a bulk tobacco product. A 12-pack of carton of cigarettes. Since the carton of cigarettes is a bulk tobacco product, it's a finished product, and it's in a 12-pack that's another finished product, it's considered a finished product. So everything they reference as examples here is like bulk tobacco, like cigarette, roll your own cigarette tobacco, like just tobacco-oriented things. But then they have filters, which is styrofoam. I don't know what they use to make filters, but it's not tobacco.
Fiberglass.
So a bulk tobacco product. So maybe I'm thinking too critically of that
Cotton.
verbiage in this regulation. But to me, even like if you could put a filter in there, I don't think it's not possible to have a pipe in there, like
No,
as a
and
bulk
that's-
tobacco product.
That's been said before that's a big gray area right now, and
Because
you know,
even
to-
like just one more point that you can use in your explanation here that might help you think too a little bit about it. Like even like e-cigarettes, like the machine itself without the nicotine tobacco insert in it is regulated under this, and that's the what do you call it, indirect smoking, whatever you want
Yeah.
to call it. So, like I'll let you go, Dan, but to me, like pipes very easily fits into this category.
it does fit into the category, and it does have me concerned, in a way that cigars, I think is going to have it easier. I think if you take let's take the PCA's definition of premium cigar, a tobacco, natural tobacco, hand rolled, long leaf, all natural, nothing but tobacco in the finished product. When you're talking pipe tobacco, there's very often, uh, chemicals that are put onto the tobacco to, keep it from breaking down and degrading. There are flavorings that are used. There are toppings that are used, that premium cigars as a all natural product just don't have to worry about. In some ways, like this cigar here, leaves are curated from a tobacco plant. They're aged in barns. They're fermented in pilons. They're sorted by, color and size and prettiness, and then rolled into a finished product, and a band is put on it. There's nothing else done to it. It is really an all natural product. Pipe tobacco is not often that. There are exceptions. Cornell and Deal's Haunted Bookshop, for instance, none of the component tobaccos in that have any kind of flavoring, topping, preservative, anything at all. It's straight 100% tobacco. It's just cut in a certain way and pressed in a certain way. That, I think, is something that, these rules could easily allow for. But the creativity of introducing like a rum to it,
Or honey.
or honey,
Yeah.
the ropes that are made, with Hogarth, one of the ways that those ropes, one of the reasons that they hold their moisture as long as they do, is that they are dipped in olive oil before they are baked, and that's one of the reasons that so now I can totally see, what kind of olive oil, what's the, how do we know that olive oil is being changed on a regular basis?
Yeah.
It's-
Is it the
it's-
same olive oil every time? Is it
and
what's that? Is it virgin? Is it
There's-
Well, see, even like
there's-
when you
there's
have like a tin of pipe tobacco, Dan, I just have a quick question so I can understand this too. Like, say like you have like Virginia and Latakia, right? Is it an even 50-50 of it, or is it around 50-50? Like, can you perfect how much of each component's actually in the tin?
You
or-
can making tobacco tins is, making a blend is literally following a recipe. X amount of this, Y amount of this, Z amount of this, mix, put in the tin.
Same for a cigar.
It's the same for a cigar that way, but
and it
but I
changes
can
with Vitola.
but I can see them, say, like Latakia is smoked over soft woods like pine and other aromatic soft woods for a period of 6 to 9 months. I can see, the FDA saying,
Which woods?
how do we know?
Where'd you
which
get the woods?
Where did that wood come from? How do we know it's, I can, it can get much more complicated for pipe tobacco. And so I'd be very interested to know, like my good friend Kaz at Laudisi, I'd love to know what he thinks about this stuff and how this might be affecting the future of the pipe tobacco world, because all of this stuff that we see, like Half Wheel, all they care about is cigars. They don't care about pipe tobacco, so their whole, and that's not a diss. That's their business, is cigars. That's all they're concerned about. And so you don't find, but there's not a Half Wheel equivalent out there for the pipe tobacco world. So I have a very vague idea of how this stuff is going to apply to pipe tobacco, because there's nobody out there who's digging through it and explaining it from that vantage point.
So I can say, just based on what I read, it seems very like, if I was lobbying for like the pipe tobacco industry, I would be very upset about this. And there's going to be no remedy because the deeming rule is, they're not even a portion of it. The argument's going on right now, and it's like, like, I don't know enough about. Well, I know a fair amount about how like the pipe tobacco is made, but these regs here, like, it's like even like the manual assembly, like when it comes to, like, they use a cigar specifically as an example for this, because that's what you typically think of. But like, pipe tobacco manual assembly, is it a machine that's doing it, that's loading it all in? Like, it's just, I think there's an extra burden. I think the pipe tobacco is going to be regulated under the identical umbrella that everything else, like cigarettes and
Well, that's the whole
e-vapes
problem, and I think that's like something that Registry said too, is that like cigarettes have been mentioned, but not chewing tobacco, and she understands the common denomination of smoking, but tobacco is tobacco, and that's like our whole argument is tobacco is not tobacco,
Well, and what you do with it,
how the format makes a difference.
It's when you take tobacco and you don't funk with it. When you're doing vaping, you've taken tobacco and you have scientifically altered it to the point where it's you've Frankensteined it. Cigarettes are Frankenstein.
Yeah. They're chemically altered so you can even breathe it into your lungs.
But then you intentionally breathe that into your lungs. You don't with cigars.
No.
You don't with pipe tobacco. And there's secondhand smoke, and
but the secondhand smoke is
But there's also secondhand smoke from fireplaces and outdoor, bonfires and stuff like that. And we're around that stuff all the time. You don't see the FDA saying, well, you don't want to be out there. And if somebody, coughs, when they're sitting around the campfire outside, you don't get concerned for their health. You just tell them to move away from the
smoke
direction of
the
the
smoke
wind.
Follows me everywhere I sit.
So it's a very different process. And like, there's nicotine is naturally found in other things that we have all the time. Eggplant, tomatoes being the big thing.
Yep.
We all like that stuff. We all like our eggplant parm. I
I
don't know about you. I don't wake up in the morning going, my God, if I don't have another slice of eggplant, I'm going to go nuts.
Right.
That's not how this works. And so, when you isolate that and you add it with a whole other bunch of chemicals, and then you take it into your lungs, which absorbs things at an exponential rate as opposed to your mouth and saliva and stuff, yeah, you're going to have a whole different effect. You know, I would suspect the same thing would happen if you had a way to vaporize chocolate and you inhaled that. I would think it would be just as bad for you if you breathed it in. So it's or coffee or popsicles. I think the same thing would happen.
The same thing goes for plastic. It's great. You can use it for so many things, but if you burn it and breathe in the fumes, you're gonna die.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like common sense here.
So going back to the reg though here, like I guess one of the things that I was looking at is because trying to like look at this in the eyes of like pipes. So like when we're arguing or setting regulations under this umbrella here for premium cigars, it seems like it's very easy to distinguish the methods behind that from literally everything else in the categories here. So I'm curious to see, and this is the fight that I think is going to happen with the pipes, is like some processes with cigarettes align with pipe tobacco. Now, not the toxins and all the unhealthy inherent risks, but like how maybe it's shredded and belted to the tin. I don't know, like again, that side of things I'm not aware of, but I'm just I would expect that a lot of the ways that cigarette manufacturers are curing and handling their tobacco might waterfall into pipes, even though it's different, but since the processes overlap in some aspects, they might get put in with, because you could also like again, and this is another topic that we can talk about as well if we have time, is this is going to trickle down to the retailer too. This isn't just going to be like from the manufacturing side. I think this is going to trickle down to shops like B&Ms, online wholesaler. I think this is going to 100% trickle down to those areas. But like when you sell pipe tobacco, you could potentially do a roll your own cigarette and put that tobacco in that. And I'm just wondering if the FDA might look at it that way when it's in the retail shops, and they might really put them in with the cigarette manufacturers. Again, I'm just hypothesizing. There's nothing in this reg that specifically says they're going to do that.
Well, I mean, you could buy table stop and table salt and snort it, but you can't regulate that.
Well, that's very
what I
different.
mean?
Like it's smoke tobacco, and it's cut in a way that the consumer can alter it. Like you can't really alter a cigar, but you can alter pipe tobacco.
I can chop up a cigar and smoke
And
it
it's
in
the
my
same varietals as cigarette tobacco for the light tobacco.
Here's the thing. As much as I'm happy that IPCPR changed its initials to something a little bit easier to pronounce, the PCA, even though you might confuse that with the Presbyterian Church of America. That used to stand for International Premium Cigar and Pipe Retailers. And when you change the name to PCA, Premium Cigar Association, you have cut pipes and pipe tobacco out of that. And one of the frustrations I have is that pipes and pipe smoking is, to a lot of shops like Twins, very important. And when you're focusing all of your time
PCPA.
and energy
PTA, Premium
on
Tobacco
on
Association.
cigars, and you're not dealing with the the pipe side of things. I mean, the pipe tobacco gets the shaft that way.
Would tobacco be too broad if they were premium tobacco? I know it's PTA, but still.
I mean, I don't think so. I think if you then went and said, what do we mean by premium tobacco? We mean premium cigars and premium pipe tobacco, that are, basically all tobacco products that are meant to be, smoked and enjoyed for, this way for these purposes, And again, the industry could use a little bit of organization. Some of this stuff, I mean, here at Twins, we've been doing a lot of research, on upgrading our POS system, and one of the things that I've found in going through that process is that there is no standard for explaining anything. You know, one company will describe their stuff, using these words. Another company will describe their stuff using different words. Some use UPC symbols, some don't. Some just say the size of it's very to find some kind of consistency across this industry. It's horrific, and so ending up with some kind of internal industry-wide understanding of this is how you present that information. Some of that we could really benefit from that. I totally see where Pat's going with this, putting a damper on creativity. I'm against that. And for, further regulation, which I totally believe this is the
toe
way,
in the pool before the dive.
No, I think I think the whole thing that we've been fighting for the last 7 years has been like the stick. Now they're holding out the carrot. Like, okay, that didn't work. But don't you think it would be nice to know that these people in these countries are being treated well, that they're in good, clean environments? Don't you think it would be great to know that you have a way, if you have a problem or you encounter a problem because you smoked your cigar and it had this problem in it, that you have a means now to go and figure out what happened and make sure that doesn't happen again, to get recompense for what it is? I mean, who's going to say no to them? But that's the problem, is that it's not that simple, but it's presented as being that simple. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Theory
like,
versus practice.
The thing that I look at too, like when I'm just reading it too, is like the purpose behind it. Like Dave has been, I said I would loop back to this point Dave was making about like how, we can kind of shape the regulations and have an opinion to it. I think that's a gag. I really don't think that's what's going to happen, because like if you have like I'm just going to use random companies for no particular reason. Patuente has a certain standard. Let's just say they have the highest standard, right? And then you have, just take Aganorsa for no particular reason, just first thing that comes in my head. They have good standards, but it's not as good as Arturo Fuente's. But for Aganorsa's situation, it's good for them. But again, it's not as good as Arturo Fuente. I don't think that they're gonna let. At some point, they're gonna uniform. I think they're gonna use this as a means to see what every factory says is the right thing to do. See who the best is, and when they do these inspections, well,
they're doing it. Why aren't you doing it?
But when they do the inspections, see really what the quality and how it's supposed to be done, and I think that's going to trickle to everyone else. I don't think every factory is going to have their own set way of doing things.
No, I think you said it right earlier in the show when you said this is going to Americanize the process, and I think that's totally spot on. That as they see these 100 different ways that different companies do things, they're going to look and say, and they might very well be right, this is the best process we've seen. Therefore, we want everybody to follow this process. And the company that's doing that is going to be like strutting around. We're the great example. Look at this. They want all the other shops to be doing things the way we do it. But what is that actually doing? It's actually saying we approve of this way of doing things, and therefore it's going to be the way we do things.
And
that's Americanizing
and
the
just
process.
conspiracizing what I think is going to happen is I don't think anyone in the industry is this stupid, so I don't think they're going to maybe fall for it. I know the PCA, I think, actually did a response to this. I didn't look at that yet, but I do think they commented. But, like, I think that this is a disguise for the FDA to be taught from the manufacturers how it should be done, and they're using it to be like, oh, shape it yourself, so it's a very transparent, honest thing. And I think that, like I said, they're going to start uniforming this process, and that's where I think it's going to cause
The FDA
potentially
is totally intending on having.
it's
the
going to
last laugh.
cause potentially a divide in the industry, because now you're going to have these big principal factories that are doing it the right way, and to them it's weeding out other factories because they don't have the means to do it the way they do it. So it's going to separate. It may be, but I'm conspiracizing, but the Titans are going to benefit from this, and they're the ones who are the machine to this whole fight.
Right.
So if you satisfy the Titans, they might pull out, and now all the other smaller
That's such a huge detriment
lines.
to the
Well,
big guys.
again, I'm conspiracizing. I'm not saying this is what's happening, but this is what I think
It is
very
what's
well
happening.
could be what's happening. And I think they're going to weed. Now the money's gone from these groups, and now it's the smaller companies. You eliminate the smaller guys. You have less factories. You have these big Titans that you can easily regulate, because maybe there's maybe 10 left or something, right? Maybe probably more than that. But you're eliminating these small, like your, Christophs, I guess, like your. I'm trying to think of Blockwork Studios, your smaller factories, and it's making it easier to regulate now. Like cigarettes, for instance, you have big name.
Do you think
factories.
that's why some of the bigger companies are buying the smaller companies up real fast so that they can protect the actual industry?
I doubt. No, that's just
No, they're
Scandinavian
not
tobacco,
protecting-
just being
yeah.
Scandinavian tobacco.
Yeah.
But that's what I think. If I had to just predict what's going to happen, that's probably their. If I was on the FDA, that would be my angle. Like, you just cut the revenue from the fight. Please the big factors, and you can easily regulate them because they have all the money to do what you want them to do and set the standard. That's what I think is happening.
All right, we're coming up at the end of the show here. Let's talk about final thoughts for the Sindicato Maduro. I think great cigar, medium
pairing.
plus, lots of cocoa, some nice espresso notes. The bourbon was fantastic with this. Created a whole new set of spice levels. This is normally I get more of a white pepper. It's more of a red pepper with the bourbon here. And
Oh, you
I
have
thought
no
the
idea,
pairing was.
Pete. I'm going to make you hot pepper,
I've been
white
thinking
pepper,
about
cold
that the
pepper.
whole time. Great pairing, Bree. You did a great job.
Thank you. Happy.
What do you think, Bree? Are you happy with everything?
Yes.
Very good.
Definitely glad we went with this over the cold brew martini.
Me too.
Yes.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I think it would have drowned out a lot of the good attributes of the cigar.
I agree. I agree. In retrospect, yes. Pat, final words.
Yeah, it's very good. It's again it's made at Aganorsa's factory, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's if you like Aganorsa and you want kind of a fuller bodied San Andreas wrap, boom.
Boom. There you go. Dave?
Mm.
Yeah, there you go.
Mm.
All right. Thanks for being with us tonight. Great discussion. We'll be back next week, 8 o'clock, Tuesday night, or maybe Monday night. It could be.
Could be.
Could be.
A schedule
Could be.
change.
We're thinking about a schedule change here. But regardless, we'll see you next week.